I've had the pleasure of hearing from the NFL Combine. Probably you did too, which is why you're here. And the first thing had to do with, well, John Spytek, the Raiders general manager's appearance. And from a baser point of view, everything he said seemed to be right on, right? Uh, well, they like guys who are professional, show up on time, uh, stuff that you would expect someone to hear, to say. And basically wrote presentation, no surprises there. Okay, fine. But then I started thinking about it from the standpoint of my longtime association with the Raiders organization, and from an unusual perspective, from primarily a government perspective, where I represented the mayor of Oakland, and prior to that, economic development, and then prior to that, as a columnist for the Montclarian. And so, um, we go from, 1993 to present day in different guises, right? Uh, but not as a player, or as a person who worked for the organization. So I always had a unique position. And so, plus, I was a huge fan of NFL football, but from a schematic place. When I was coming up, when I was a kid, I hated football. I thought football was something where people who looked like me played it, but we didn't coach it. And my grandfather, rest in peace, would say, "Oh, Zinni, I want you to play, football." He said this to me when I was 6 years old, and I said, "I'm not going to do that because I don't see anybody. I don't see any black folks coaching. I only see it playing." And that was my attitude. That was my attitude. My attitude was, "Hey, you know what? Um, there's something wrong with it." And I was 6 years old when I saw it. So football at the time, also football at the time was just becoming big. The first Super Bowl was, what, 67? And so, and that was, of course, the Raiders, and um, let's say the, the Packers were in the first Super Bowl versus the Chiefs. Okay. And then the second one, the Raiders were in that one. Um, and they lost to the Packers. Remember that? So then, of course, through the '70s, I was really the first. The first, well, a lot of people would say the '60s was the golden era of the NFL, but I really believe it was the '70s. That was the emergence of the Dallas Cowboys as champions, um, and the Raiders as champions, and the Steelers as champions. So you think about the pillars of what you think of championship football today, you really have to start with the '70s. All right. So that was the development of something called the Raiders DNA. All right. And I remember, I had no interest in the Raiders until 1975, when we lived on Warwick Street in Oakland, and my mother had a visitor, and I had no idea what was going on downstairs. I was reading the Star Trek technical manual. This is a weekend. I think it was a Saturday. So my mom said, "Zinni, Otis is here." And I didn't know who Otis was. Um, so I came downstairs, and Otis was Otis Sistrunk. He played for the Raiders. And that, frankly speaking, at the time went from one ear out the other. I was kind of like, okay, fine. This man is my mom's friend, right? Well, they weren't dating. And so my initial conversation with Otis was short. It went like, "Hey, Mr. Sistrunk, how are you doing?" And, "Great, Zenny, how are you?" "Fine." "Hey, do you do you like photography? Do you take pictures? I just got this Nikon camera, right?" "Oh, don't know anything about photography." So I said, "Hey, do you like Star Trek?" "Didn't watch Star Trek." So at that point, I determined that Otis and I had nothing to talk about. Um, and I went back upstairs. It was nice to meet you. You know, I had nothing else to say. Uh, but then I figured, you know what? If this man's going to be a part of our life, uh, then, you know, I should know something about him. But we didn't have the internet then. Wasn't even thought of as an idea. What was that, right? Voice over IP, TV over IP, you know, whatever. What's IP, right? Nothing like that. So anyway, um, then I was in a bookstore called Crocs and Botano, and I ran up on something called the NFL's Encyclopedic History of Professional Football. And I started paging through it, and I found Otis. And so, but then I also kept paging through it, and I, you know, read the statistics and everything. That was interesting, you know. But what really caught my eye was a back section called A Diagram History of Professional Football. And it had a picture of a man by the name of Tom Landry wearing his snap brim fedora, and an explanation that Coach Landry took engineering principles of feedback and control theory and adopted them to professional football. Now, me being interested in engineering, that, whoa, that just was just, right? And so I had a diagram about the flex defense, and how it was a zone defense against the run, and then, of course, shifting before the snap. That sold me. Boom. You know, I immediately became a Dallas Cowboys fan for that reason, as much as I was an Oakland Raiders fan because of Otis and the local ties, like Gene Upshaw, his brother Marvin Upshaw, Clem Daniels, later Dave Casper, who handled my 401k, go on and on and on, okay? That was a local play. But the Dallas Cowboys was an intellectual play. It was a personal play. And so in 1979, I had the opportunity to actually go to the Dallas Cowboys headquarters at 6160 North Central Expressway. I was invited. Yeah, I was invited. Process that. I was invited as a kid, Skyline High School kid, class of 80. Have a reunion this Saturday. And so you would say, well, what is that all I have to do with today? And that's exactly why I say you need to listen. Okay? Anyway, that was really interesting. So during that period, that visit, I learned about the Cowboys defense and everything else. But as I was learning about the Cowboys that way, I was meeting more and more Oakland Raiders. I was going to the games regularly. I remember I ran into my then optometrist, Dr. Howard Rose. He was in section 209, seat 14. Yeah. Eyeglass doctor. That was 1976. And then one day, and I really became interested in football, diagrams, drew up football plays. I created my own playbook. All right. Designed a pitch pass for Skyline High School in 1979, not 1980, which went for 1978 actually, which went for 78, which went for 36 yards and a touchdown against Fremont High. That was the first play I ever designed. It worked. Okay. It worked. This is, again, the days before the internet, everything. These are the days we actually had to think out when you're designing something. You had to actually think about the timing of it, how the defense would react, all that stuff, right? I did that. Yeah, I did that. And that was 1978, which means I was 16. Okay? Anyway, during that time, my mom worked for United. got on a plane and I met, by accident, in first class, a guy named Lou Erber. Now, if you know Raider lore, you know who Lou Erber is. Go back there. Yeah, okay, now I've got that. Now I'm back. Okay, now I'm back. Okay, now it's cleared up. Now it's cleared up. At any rate, now it's cleared up. Okay, so as I was saying, whoops. As I was saying, and now for my next trick. All right, got on a flight, first class, was sitting next to a man named Lou Erber. And if you know anything about Raiders lore, you know exactly who Lou Erber was. Rest in peace. Lou Erber was an assistant coach with the Oakland Raiders. He was also a scout. And Mr. Erber happened to be on his trip. And he had a big, thick book after finding out, particularly that I knew I would assist drunk, well, he really opened up. And he showed me his book of, you know what the book consisted of? Not just players they were interested in college, but also he had a whole section of Raider players. Get this, yeah, Raider players that were the ideal for each position. So at linebacker, what picture do you have? Number 41, Phil Villapiano. Yep, Phil Villapiano was the ideal for how the Raiders evaluated outside linebackers at that time. That was Raider DNA, okay? And I say that because I don't hear that from Raiders general manager John Spytek, and it concerns me. This is the same person that was general manager when the Raiders lost all those games last year. He is still the general manager. It's one thing to, speak this, I call it base level jargon about what you want in a player. But it's another thing to understand what Raider DNA is and how to recognize it in the modern player. Coming out of college, if you can't do that, then you cannot effectively build a Raiders organization. It is one thing to build an organization of players, but if they don't have the Raider DNA, if you're not picking your players from that perspective, then it's not happening. So it invites the question, does Fernando Mendoza have Raiders DNA? The answer is yes. Okay? Why? Because he went to Cal. Before everything else, he went to Cal. The Cal, you learn some of that thinking in the Bay Area that is a culmination of a lot of norms in the Bay Area that in part produced the Oakland Raiders. He's got that. And that Raider DNA, for me and Fernando, to this day, still is best demonstrated in that 98-yard drive that he engineered for us to beat Stanford in the big game. And that was a thing of beauty, okay? I mean, Fernando, we started, down on the 2. And there were a couple of situations where it looked like, oh my God, we're not going to do this. We're not going to finish this. We're not even going to get their promised land. And he made 2 very memorable scrambles to save what should have been a kill drive. He made 3 passes. Admittedly, Stanford was giving us the sideline. He made 3 passes that were a thing of beauty to continue that drive. And then ultimately he scored, okay? That was a Raiders play. That was a Ken Stabler type play. He was already known for the fourth quarter comeback. So when I talk about Raider DNA, I see Stabler in him. I see Rich Gannon in him. That's what I think of, okay? Primarily. Not in terms of looks, all right? That, you know what it is? It's that want to. Want to. Want to. So yeah, I think we can't go wrong there. But then let's talk about defense. Who do we have that's like, you know, Monty Johnson in his day? Or Reggie Kinlaw, right? Or Howie Long, okay? Or Lester Hayes, all right? Okay, all right? Which cornerback out there is most like Lester Hayes? You put him on there and he sticks. Look at some guys from Ohio State, I think, can fill that bill today. All right? But then we have to go after them. All right? We don't who out there is the next Charles Woodson. Okay? And as far as I'm concerned, if you're going to build a Raider team, this is how you have to think. Otherwise, you're not building a Raider team because you're not consciously selecting players. They're harking back to the best of the Raiders under a philosophy that has won games. What is that philosophy? Dictate to the defense. Don't take what you want, not so much what the defense gives you. Although, if you understand how to engineer defenses to line up a certain way, you can do the defense to basically give you what you want without even realizing it. All right? And then there's, on defense, 11 angry men. Man-for-man coverage. Occasional blitzing, okay? Defense, linemen are big, strong, and fast. They're not small, all right? They're like John Matuzak. John Matuzak was more of a mountain than a man. All right? He was. When the Raiders shifted to a 3-4, people got, how are you going to pull that off? Your linemen are too big, like Otis, right? Well, they did. Otis Sistrunk, primarily a defensive tackle, made a fantastic nose tackle. And the way John Madden played the 3-4. These guys are going to two-gap, which is something that John Gruden didn't like, which is why I love John. We're of one mind on that. I want people who are going to flash through the line and down the running back for a loss. I don't want my running back seeing the line of scrimmage. That was John Gruden's philosophy. That's why he liked the 4-man front. Okay? That's why he liked the 4-man front. I've never been a fan of the 3-man front. Now, if you say, hey, look, they're playing hybrid, I get it. But I am not a fan, even in the Seahawks situation, of that kind of stopping the run. I prefer you shoot the gaps. I prefer that you give the quarterback hell behind the line of scrimmage. That's what I'm saying. Can I get that with this defense? You say, but it's the Seahawks defense. I don't care. I'm talking about the likelihood of success based on the mathematics of getting past one guy rather than two-gapping. All right? If you're in a two-gap, all I'm saying is, you know what? Hey, play a flex defense like the Cowboys, where there's one guy back and the other guy that's up and he's actually shooting a gap, right? It's scientific. Rather than, everybody playing the same technique up and down the line, which I think is stupid. I like Landry's approach. Because then you could alter the strength, all right? Flex strong. The defensive end on the strong side is down on the line of scrimmage, shutting off the run. Defensive tackle next to him, which could be the inside linebacker, is off the line of scrimmage, protecting that gap over here. Middle linebacker, which could be the nose tackle, goes here, all right? Plugs up that area. But if you're in the middle linebacker, you can also do what's called a 3 call, or basically, if you think about it, a 4 call, and coming back, so you're stopping the offensive tackle play on the offside if your strength is to this side, all right? That's the Landry way. I like intelligent gap protection, but I like force. Do I get the force? Will I get the force out of the Raiders defense? We'll see. But I have to admit, I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical that I'm going to get a Raiders organization in whole that putting together guys that have up and down the line, every position there's Raider DNA. This guy reminds me of Monty Johnson. This guy reminds me of Dave Casper. That guy over there reminds me of Ray Chester, who ought to be in the Hall of Fame. Okay? That guy over there, yeah. He reminds me of Fred the Hammer Williamson. Okay? All right? Or Nnamdi Asomugha. All right? Okay? So my point is, Raider DNA should be reflected in the team you put together. Show this to Mark Davis. All right? Mark, hey, Mark, how you doing? You know I'm right about this. This is how you're talking about building the Raiders organization, building the Raiders team. This is what you do. Raider DNA. I don't hear it from John Spytek or Klint Kubiak. And so, yeah, I'm concerned. I understand a number of people say, hey, you know what? Are we going to, we can only go up from where we were. I get it. But you know what? I want a championship. So do you. You don't want all the other stuff. Think about what I'm saying. You know I'm right about this stuff. Raider DNA should be represented in the current team. Raider DNA. I'll see you. Okay.